Welcome, everyone, back to the New York City Multifamily Podcast. Shaun Riney, as always. Today we are joined by the President of SPONY, Ann Korchak, Small Property Owners of New York. And thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for joining us. I've been meaning to get this on the calendar for a while. I thought it would be nice just to give the listeners like a little background. We can start how SPONY is different. I know it's very similar to CHIP and RSA, same type of concept and idea behind the landlord industry advocacy groups. But how are you guys different from CHIP and RSA?
Well, we're 100% volunteer organization, which I think probably sets us apart. We don't have paid staff. Dealing with lawmakers and the media, it's all volunteers like myself. And most of our members are small property owners, just like the title of our organization, and most are multi-generational. In my case, it's my husband's grandparents that bought property on the Upper West Side. So my husband and his brothers are the third generation to be running the building. And we find that a very common thread characteristic among many SPONY members. People in the neighborhoods where they immigrated to often bought the property. So, generations of people that came to New York, this was their entry, right, into multi-generational wealth, earning a livelihood. And, I worry that the next generation of immigrants won't have the same opportunity that previous generations have had.
How many units total would you say the average, active member of SPONY has?
I would say, the New York City members tend to be small building operators. That 6 to 12 unit size. During COVID, our reach definitely expanded. We have quite a few smaller buildings now, like 1 to 4 family homes. And then, people in Long Island and Westchester and Rockland that were really struggling with the eviction moratorium, ERAP, the cancel rent movement, the closing down of the courts. A lot of people came to know the name SPONY at that point because we were in the media. In social media, it's so much easier to reach people now. So with Facebook groups that kind of popped up all over the state, people found us. So we do have quite a few members now that are, outside of the boroughs and, in places around the state. Yeah,
and so you guys send out a weekly email update, right? Basically coaching people about what's happening in the industry, right? Not everyone can keep up with every new local law or compliance mandate or how do I deal with this situation or that situation. So you guys are definitely, I would imagine, a huge resource for people. Right. And
CHIP and RSA are a huge resource for us, right? I mean, so,
everyone's got a mentor.
Right. So, as a professionally run organizations, they have depth, right? They have, attorneys on staff and policy people that, are keeping up on these things. So, I would say most of the members of SPONY are also RSA members, not as much CHIP because that just tended to be an organization that had larger owners. But certainly if, fewer than I know of, because they appreciated what they bring.
The touch.
Right.
So what are the most frequently asked questions in the group these days that may be different than before? What's the biggest worry on people's minds?
I would say a real immediate issue is probably, housing court and, how your cases are progressing or not progressing. The huge expense of, housing somebody for now maybe 36 months.
It's insane.
Or over 36 months. And with no end in sight. A couple of weeks ago, a young SPONY member, she and her mom have a 2-family house in Queens. As soon as COVID started, the tenants stopped paying rent. And
they live above if they're in the 2. Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe side by side. Yeah. But they were under the same roof.
God, that's got to be awkward.
It's very, very, that's the, like that micro owner. That's like a micro small owner is under a tremendous amount of stress when you are under the same roof as your abuser. I think that's what it is.
It's 100% is what it calls spade a spade.
Right. So, I find interacting with those owners really like the most heartbreaking because they are interacting with these people all the time. But this case, like I said, is predated or started at COVID, and they're still there. And she had a hearing maybe 6 weeks ago, and it was adjourned till January. She like took to Twitter, and her tweet, somebody picked it up. It had over 100,000 views.
Wow. Oh, went totally viral. What did it say? What did it say?
Just a recap of what I said about how long this process has been, and what is the state of New York when that can happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Why are there so few judges? Like, what do you think is the biggest backlog? Why does it?
Well, I think it's probably manpower. I mean, we have heard, as court did start to kind of get up and going, that there's not enough clerks, space too. Maybe there's not enough courtrooms. But there was a point when the governor did expand a lot of the courts, but housing court was not one that got more manpower.
Got it. It's interesting. It's almost like in these scenarios that you just described, the laws are there to protect the little guy, the tenants, but oftentimes the little guys are also the landlords, and it's kind of it's a lose-lose really, where they're kind of voting against their own interest, and they're hurting. If they weren't titled, if their title wasn't landlord, they very easily could be the tenant. Right,
and the concept of this universal right to counsel, which New York City does have. I don't know if it's fully funded, but the state, is talking about offering the same, but without any sort of means testing. Right? So, potentially somebody that's living in some loft in Soho who just decides to stop paying his or her rent, and, a very well-resourced, Wall Street executive could walk in and say, I need counsel. Right? But there are many cases where the housing provider is probably just as needy financially as a tenant that is in front of a judge.
Right. That's what we've been saying. Peter Vondre, our partner, he always said, like, you can't have neighborhood revitalization without good housing.
Right.
And when you destroy the fabric of housing called small property owners, you got to think of every building like a business. There's no way that a supermarket can run in 2023 expenses with 1974 rents. Right. Show me one business in planet Earth that can run in today's expense world in 2023, but be based on 1980s income. Right. It does not work. It breaks. It's just a question of when. Right.
There's certainly a lot of challenges right now. What do you think are some of the positive and negative things about our industry right now moving forward? Is there anything you think that maybe the narrative is shifting a little bit?
The animosity and vitriol, that's very much a part of the discourse. The nastiness you'll hear, get a real job, as if, providing housing isn't an honorable way, to make a living, is very hurtful, to those of us that are really trying to do the right thing and be the best operators that we can be. We need to kind of get away from that. Yeah. That's a real problem. But on the positive side, I would say I'm always surprised at the willingness of lawmakers to, if not themselves, send a staff member to come to a meeting so they can hear from.
And is that a new phenomenon that they're willing to actually at least attend, or maybe they should, participate and house somebody in their bedroom of their home for free for 36 months, but we won't ask them too much, I'm kind of new to this advocacy world, right? So my entry came during COVID, and early in the pandemic, lawmakers themselves came to the calls very, very often. They wanted to hear from us. They wanted to see, how we were getting by, and, wanted to hear from everybody. More often now, my organization, we're talking to staff members, right? It's not like CHIP or RSA showing up and saying, send so-and-so, here to speak to us. Yeah. But that's not always the case. I mean, sometimes, we maybe start the discussion with a staff member, and when the lawmaker finishes up whatever he or she was doing, we'll come and sit down and, have some of the discussion with us. There is a willingness of lawmakers to speak to us. And I mean, obviously it's their job, but I think that the conscientious ones know
Right. We need to speak to everybody.
Do you think
so
that they're
they can make the best decision.
starting to recognize the pain? Like, to me, it just seems like they're just waiting for everybody to be so delinquent that they can't pay the property tax, and like they literally see the buildings crumbling down, and like until that visual realization hits them, like nothing's going to change. Like, do you see, like, are you sensing that it's actually breaking through, or is it kind of more just listening just to say that we listen?
I mean, that's probably a big part of it, but I think in New York, in all parts of government, wait until it's a real disaster to react to things.
Right.
And, maybe the smarter thinking people who have experience outside of government, people that have maybe worked in other industries and know there's some warning signs here that we all should be paying attention to. But those voices are probably the minority because so many lawmakers are activists.
Yeah, so
they didn't come to government with experience in running a business.
Like the founding, I've listened to a lot of theories on this, but the founding fathers of our country weren't like career politicians.
Right.
They were farmers, they were welders, whatever.
Right.
And now it seems like you have a lot of people that are almost like they start in politics and they basically are lifers, but perhaps the more successful or innovative way would be to think of politics as like a public service where you start out doing one thing, property management, some type of business, whatever, and then you serve your community, like kind of how, I mean, you kind of just,
you're doing the same thing. Yeah.
You're doing the same thing.
Right.
So I think it would be helpful probably for almost like Bloomberg did, where he was a businessman and then he came in and he ran the city like a business, and he's kind of popping in and out of business and politics. What, so you got, how long is your term as president? 4 years? 3?
Just one year.
It's just 1 year?
Yeah, so I was just elected. Our last board meeting, I was reelected.
Okay. And how many times can you get reelected?
I don't know if our bylaws actually say how many.
Okay.
I mean, I certainly don't want to overstay my welcome. So
but you like it? Like you find
well,
the
it's
work
challenging.
gratifying?
Yeah, I sometimes life just plops you in a spot that you didn't expect. I mean, I never expected to have this role. I mean, I was involved with SPONY. I was definitely I was doing a lot, but very much behind the scenes, which is kind of my nature, I think.
Yeah.
And when we had this back, I guess 2 years ago, when we had our first kind of newly revised organization, we had a lot. We said we were going to update the bylaws. We should, vote in a new board and all that. And I was just kind of quietly sitting there, and there was a lot of discussions about, who wants to run, what role do you think? And then somebody said, Ann's been awfully quiet. I was like, oh no! And then before I knew it, I got nominated and voted in. So
and there were enough eyes, I guess.
Yeah.
That's
so it was. I mean, clearly the first year was like trying to figure it all out.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I'm always curious, what are some of the biggest learning curves in the leadership position? And then also, I don't know, where do you go from here? I'm not.
What's on your? What do you want to accomplish in your year? What would be, if you could accomplish one thing in the next 12 months that would put a smile on your face ear to ear? What would that one thing be?
A good cause eviction is dead.
Okay, so killing universal rent control, eliminating that from the discussion, because that would completely bankrupt the small property.
Right. I mean, universal rent control, everybody hates, right? The big owners, the small owners, and people all around the state that never heard of that word before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? People who, found SPONY and other small owner groups, around the state, and they do not want good cause eviction.
Yeah, I think oftentimes the conversations in politics kind of start about where the two parties disagree. And then they kind of never really go anywhere. But what about starting from where we do agree? Whereas we need more housing. Right. So how do we do it? Right. This is like really simple economics of supply and demand. If you limit the supply and the demand goes up, rents go up. So
it's just so counterintuitive, like if you're a politician out there listening, what the rent laws in 2019 did was penalize the owners that were providing affordability. Anybody that was on a preferential rent where they were giving the discount to the tenant than what they were legally allowed to charge, it was no more preferential rents. You have to be, forever frozen at the rent that we were giving you as a preferential. Same concept with the 2 to 5, family owners that have a valuable property, but many times are renting at significantly below market rents because they've lived in the area for a long time. Maybe they live in the building. They like people. They don't like gouging people into.
Right. Small owners don't like turnover.
Yeah, they want to keep.
They really don't.
Yeah.
You know,
Keep it steady Eddie.
Right. Relationship building, especially if you're in a small building like you just said. Oftentimes you're growing up with these people, right? You're at, I know one SPONY member who's been at this a long time, so in his second generation. Like, he's been at weddings, christenings. He's been the executor of people's wills. I mean, you have.
It doesn't have to be antagonistic.
No, it doesn't. A couple of weeks ago, I spent a couple of afternoons in an apartment. Two women that have been tenants with us probably close to 50 years. We had some work that had to get done. They were away for the summer, and they were, they'd be coming back soon. And the work that had to be done was messy. They had to repair a ceiling. And I said, I don't want these contractors to just go in there and start knocking stuff around. Like, I went into their apartment. I took the pictures down. I wrapped stuff up. My daughter came with me. We put stuff in boxes. And when they were done, I went back and put the apartment back in place so that when they came back, they don't have kids of their own. Like,
Right.
Right. It just seemed like a nice, decent thing to do.
Yeah, you're a good human being.
But what the current laws are doing is eliminating those owners from the marketplace. Most of what has been happening the last decade is the smaller property owner cannot keep up with the entire refrigerator full of notices and gotchas and fines and penalties and everything else, and they are selling to owners that have the capability of having a full staff on board. And that's just been the natural progression, which isn't what anybody wants, but it's what the legislation is dictating. Even more so now. I mean, hopefully a recession doesn't go to waste here, with rates rising, insurance premiums rising, expense rising. Like, I hate to just be a doomsdayer, but they have to change this now in order to keep the fabric of these neighborhoods together. Because when buildings fall apart, the neighborhoods fall apart. Right.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to have a further consolidation where everything's going to be owned by private equity firms. The same headlines you see in the Wall Street Journal about some of the biggest institutions in the world being the largest single-family homeowners in the country, and as a result, prices go up. People get squeezed. If you're a buyer and you're bidding against pick your giant institution, how are you going to win? The only way you win is if you pay dramatically more. So it makes it really difficult.
Yeah, I don't see housing getting any better when it's in the hands of fewer and fewer.
Correct.
Yeah,
owners.
that's well said, actually. Yeah.
Right. And the example I gave about helping a couple. Right. Blackstone's not sending somebody up there, to make sure that their treasured, pictures didn't get trashed while, a careless contractor was scraping the ceiling.
Yeah. Right. What do you think? I guess you guys can kind of both answer this, but what do you think some of the smartest people or the most proactive people in SPONY are doing right now today?
Probably dealing with a down boiler.
A down boiler.
Right? Today's a little colder than it's been.
Putting out fires, basically.
November 1st.
Basically. Heating season. Oh, right. So this, by the way, I've been thinking about this, Shaun, for the last couple of days. Fuel prices, heating season, everyone feels the pinch in heating season, right?
Yes.
The bills are 5x in heating season.
Yes.
So
right. And, and I would say, communication is much easier now with owners and tenants, right, or property managers and tenants. A quick text or an email, we understand the boiler's down, the plumber's been called, we're going to update you. That just makes for a much easier situation, right? Granted, you're not thrilled that maybe you're getting cold and there's no hot water, but put
a sweater on.
Attention is going to be people are paying attention and it's going to be addressed.
Right.
Shaun, what do you think? When we're talking to different owners about, whether they own one building or 10 buildings, what do you think some of the smartest people in the industry are doing right now? What are they saying to you?
Well, 12 months ago, I would have said, try to refinance or get your debt rolled over before, this continual, things go. Secondly, I would say just be on the front foot of insurance. I just explained to you an example of a personal building I own pretty much a perfect building. There's no flags on it other than frame construction, and the premium just went from $9,000 to $19,000. I was canceled. The coverage completely just went away. I didn't get the notice until 3 weeks before the policy is lapsing. So now I'm forced to all of a sudden be in emergency mode trying to get another carrier, and I'm basically left with one option. So I just think that's the canary in the coal mine. It seems like insurance across the nation is rising up, and even if you have no loss runs, nothing's wrong with it, you might be on the precipice of having a dramatically higher insurance rate. So know when your policy is expiring, call your insurance broker 4 or 5 months early, shop around early, because you don't want to be in a position like I'm in right now.
Right. Right. And I would, add to that property taxes. The RSA is part of a group that's brought a lawsuit, against the unfair property tax system in New York. I think it's Tax Equity Now, New York. Yep. And it's, a wide variety of groups are under this umbrella that brought the lawsuit, and it will be heard by the Court of Appeals. It kept on getting pushed off. Now it was supposed to be this month, and now it got pushed again to January. And there is a major problem in New York, right? When say a two-family home in South Ozone Park, right, is appraised at $700,000, but their taxes are the same as a $4 million right.
It is crazy. It seems almost bizarre how the tax system has been worked out, and apartment buildings are absolutely creamed. We're seeing 25% of the income. But yes, you're absolutely right. A two-family in Ozone Park can have the same or higher tax bill somehow than a two-family on a park block in Park Slope.
Right.
It's pretty just wild.
Right. So on the Upper West Side, right, a multifamily building like ours, when I started helping my mother-in-law in 2006 with the buildings, our property taxes were $33,000, and this year they're $94,000.
What?
I mean,
wow. Now you wonder why the rent is so damn high.
Right.
You got to pay the tax man.
Right.
That's how it is. Wow.
Yes.
That's unbelievable.
So none of my rent-regulated apartments cover our operating expenses.
Yeah, so the free market tenants bear the burden.
Correct.
And it's not like these people are necessarily all, making 6 and 7 figures, right? They could be new college graduates.
Right. They're the younger generation, so they are lifting the load, right? Yeah. They're shouldering an unfair burden of the building operating expenses because the other apartments are not covering the operating expenses. And I do believe if there was a real understanding of that maybe there would be some more outrage and there would be some pressure on lawmakers to be working on behalf of those renters as well, not just those that are in the rent stabilization.
They have the statistics. They really,
they do.
A rent guidelines board had the clear operating costs. I think it was 16% year over year, and we got a paltry, whatever it was, 3% increase.
Right.
Like, they know the data. They just
Well, they've become a political body.
Exactly. They want votes.
We'd be better off with a HUD type system, right, where they just plug the numbers into an algorithm. There's no political arguing, right?
Yeah.
They just they plug the numbers
get
in.
the votes out of it. Why are we voting on
and you
anything?
see it, right? When every year HUD releases those small fair area market, I forget,
free market, reset, based
and they go up with as the cost of living goes up, as insurance, inflation, all those things. It's you can see it.
The RGB hearings every year in June are. You just have to listen and watch it. Yeah. It's definitely more emotion than it is data driven.
Right. But it's also become a circus.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
full on riot.
Right. So maybe 10 years ago was the first time I went to one, because I was an active RSA member. I would always attend their meetings, and they would always ask, we need owners to go and speak. And I said, all right, I'll go try it. It was one of the most frightening experiences of my life the first time I went. I said, what am I doing here?
I should be president of this organization.
I was going to say, you might be nominated for the RGB board, just so you know.
Yeah. But this year, when they stormed the stage, right, and menacingly chanted around those public members, right? Who
volunteers.
They don't really get paid to do that.
No,
right?
Not at all.
They're appointed by the mayor, with the best of intentions to evaluate the data, and and that's how
I mean, they should have been arrested, those lawmakers and all those people that went up on that stage.
Yeah.
So none of us went to any in-person hearings this year because we're so outnumbered. And if the security couldn't protect those public members.
Yeah, what are they doing outside?
Right. What are they going to protect me and any other small owner
Yeah,
that
it's
showed up?
perfectly reasonable to be scared.
Yeah.
Yeah, so interesting. We're in a funky world right now.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. But
is there anything more that outside of joining the organizations and being in the loop? Like, is there one thing that small property owners should be doing? Like, I always just thought, like, should we just have like a glass encased, like bulletproof glass bill of rights, like explaining just like how a building functions, like this is the cost per unit to operate, this is what the rents are in the building.
You want to create like a new constitution, almost like just a declaration.
We haven't had conversations like that, right?
Like, you used to have a
declaration of operations.
You used to have equity in your unit when you could tap into it when you're sick of walking 5 flights up a stairs, that it would be actually an economic incentive for an owner to give you $50,000, $100,000 because it was a win-win for everybody, and that was stolen from you. I want that in a glass case. I want it in a glass case when one tenant doesn't pay rent for 36 months just because they can get away with it. It affects the quality of life for everyone else in the building. This should be a community shaming of people that are taking advantage of the system.
Yeah, there just doesn't seem to be a lot of appetite for that. I mean, you and I are looking at it very closely, and we see that. But I would think, for owners, they really have to be the best operators they could be, right? So that, we can't be a target, right? For, somebody who wants to say, landlords, shouldn't exist, right? I mean, that's part of it. So belonging to a group like SPONY, where you can, you have access to resources. Like, we have an in-person meeting next week. We have over 70 people already registered to come. There's a real appetite, right, for people who are kind of living the same madness, right, operating the same business, to connect, right? And we share resources with each other, right? Share the name of, a great roofer, or, an insurance broker who, got you out of a jam.
Yeah, Misery loves company.
Right. We have, somebody coming to speak about the gas compliance obligation, right? A member who, and then we also have somebody speaking about the lead law. But, also an opportunity for us to kind of, bring everybody up to date on other things that we're working on. We have... a group reached out to us about a month or so ago, a new nonprofit that's very well funded, with the intention of creating a better voucher process. And, I was a little skeptical, but I said, I don't want to be only complaining all the time. We have to be solution oriented. And they seem to have very smart people, very well intentioned and well funded. And myself and another member who's an attorney, and another member who has a lot of program tenants in his building. Like, we heard them out, and I said, well, this sounds kind of promising. And we had some follow-up conversations, and we're going to have a webinar so that they can present to our members and say, this is the kind of service we can make this process better for you. Yeah,
it seems like a really good Band-Aid for the situation. I always get nervous about basically all these subsidies, not necessarily addressing the problem, but you have basically more federal funding, just like, putting...
Yeah, we have a big deficit.
You have this huge... national deficit and no real clear way to address the solution. And housing is obviously in there. We were talking about insurance being in there.
Right.
The interest rates are rising, so the government has to refinance their debt. But how do you actually solve the problem? I was talking to a client last week about, I think, one of the new laws where you can't discriminate against a voucher tenant.
Right, income discrimination.
So, and the way that it was described to me about how this would work was, you have a voucher tenant, they apply for the vacant apartment, and you're not allowed to do your own background check on them because Section 8 already did the background check, or whatever organization did it. But their standards might not be the same standards as yours, and now you're going to go put this person into your apartment that you just renovated and whatnot, and you just aren't really able to learn more about that person. Right. And I think he ended the call with me with, what is ownership?
Well,
that is a question,
there
right?
is no such thing as like landlord is such an outdated term. Like we're not lording it over anything.
No, the same way we got rid of
servant.
The same way we got rid of master bedroom. It's I forget what the new term is. Like
primary
suite. Primary suite. Yeah, like you have to get rid of landlord.
We have a member, Lincoln Eccles. He's been in. He's just done a lot of media. I mean, people know who he is, and Lincoln he said it's not like we're even owners anymore. It's like we're supers of the building.
Yeah,
right.
That
the tenants have rights that
the owners don't have.
Yeah.
To not pay anything, to not pay a bill. Like that's their right that they have is to not pay. The owners don't have that option. Like you have to pay your property taxes, your sewer and everything. Well, this has been like fascinating. And I have one final question. It's a little bit of a different one than Seth usually proposes. We're here with Mayor Adams outside of universal rent control. What's one thing that you'd like him to accomplish if he's out there listening? Mayor Adams, we'd love to have you on the pod.
Yeah, the property tax reform.
Property tax reform.
Because we're all being crushed.
Right.
I think that's probably a good way to describe it. The property tax burden is enormous. And, especially if you have majority rent stabilized units, people could be, over 50% of the rent roll now is probably going back to the city. The city is a silent partner that shows no mercy. And, it's just got to stop. I mean, it's unsustainable. The increases that we're seeing are just unsustainable.
Well, hopefully there's a brighter side on the horizon. We really appreciate your efforts, your volunteerism, your advocacy, all the help that you're doing. You can find Ann's contact information, SPONY, join the organization, be a part of the solution. Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks, Ann.
Okay, yeah, thank you.